Hey folks, Triple Crown here, coming to you from Vancouver, British Columbia. This is a round 15 summary. The game has concluded. There is a victor. Not what I would have predicted, but it was a fun game. So do not listen to my predictions any further. It is an Allied victory, and the British, with the preempt of the Russians, have recaptured Moscow. And it's not something, even if the Russians had moved all available units from the turn prior instead of moving them away, would have made much of a difference. The British just had too much firepower coming from their aircraft, and they didn't even roll that well in the battle. And this is what they had remaining, which was 10 armor, a mech, 2 AAA, and they lost 3 aircraft that were shot down to AAA fire. So they still have 1 tactical bomber and a whole fleet of Lancaster bombers with 1 medium bomber, which is a Wellington. So the Allies conclude with the victory, and the Axis are able to achieve 11 victory cities. They needed 12 for the W, and they did not get it. If this game was played longer, I wonder how it would have played out. Now, the Germans are in a little bit of trouble now in Russia. All of the partisans that were there have now turned into infantry and liberated, and more partisans have popped up. So almost all of Russia now on the Western Front, or the Eastern Front, is almost now back into Russian hands. However, if this game was longer, I did not do the build for or do any turns over here in Europe, but the Allies did bring all of their stuff here into Kharkov. Now the Axis are in a position now that they could almost shut the channel finally and attack this area in Turkey and shut it, or at least lock it down and lock the British fleet in the Black Sea. Or is it the Black Sea? Or I think so. But over here, the Italians did lose a bunch of infantry here, about 29 units. But the Germans, they just have so many fast movers, so much infantry. It would still be a slog here in Western Europe unless the Americans recommitted to bringing more ground units across, and that would have to be in concert with the British and the French. But the Germans would have to continue to support the Italians, who are now in sort of a bad way after they lost the 29 units. But it's not over. In the battle of attrition, if the Americans were going to recommit to the battle in Europe, maybe Turin is eventually going to fall. So the Italian or the Allies could have gone into Turin heavy this turn, and so maybe Italy would have fallen in maybe 2 turns. I'm not sure. And once Italy falls, that's nice for the Allies, but the issue now is there's not many Italians left to flip and join the Allies. So yes, Italy falls, but that probably means that Paris would fall to the Germans. So would the Allies want to trade that, or would they want to build up slowly and then take Italy when they can also hold Paris? That's probably what they would have to do, or at least that's what their objective would be. Now over here in the Pacific, the Japanese were able to hold onto the Philippines. Now, the Zeros, as I mentioned in the last video, have an extra point of movement, and when I was counting sea zones, the route that I was counting was the longer route. So the Japanese were able to fly some of their Zeros that were sitting in Hawaii to reinforce the Philippines, and the Japanese were able to use their air transports to bring in another 2, and they had 4 naval transports up off of Tokyo, and so they were able to bring I think it was 11 infantry down to the Philippines, and their aircraft that were sitting here went 1, 2, 3, 4. So they brought in 2 aircraft on that route, and they had another couple aircraft sitting, I think it was here on a carrier. And so the British and the Canadians and the Commonwealth, they decided to go the southern route, and the Japanese set up a similar blockade with their ships, and the Commonwealth barely made it through. They survived the first blockade. They had to leave behind 16 ships, which only meant 2 made it through. Luckily, they were able to bring in 2 cruisers and some aircraft, and the Japanese scrambled, and they only survived with, I think it was 1 cruiser and 1 aircraft. So they almost were not even able to perform the attack on the Philippines. And the Americans came in second, and they rolled really well. However, the Japanese, with their fortification and their pillbox and all of the aircraft, they lost maybe about 5 or 6 aircraft. So even though the Americans were attacking with a B-29 and a medium bomber and about 10 ground units, they did not have enough to take the Philippines. So the Philippines is safe, and the Japanese still have a ton of money. So what they would probably do, they didn't do a build this turn, is these navies would be going back up to Tokyo next turn and build more navy. So that would be interesting, because currently the Allies in the Pacific have the upper hand. So would the Americans commit to spending more money on navy, which is grossly expensive? And the Japanese now have this just massive air force. They've got 6 aircraft that are here, and another whole bunch that are still sitting off of Hawaii. That's about another almost 10. So that is huge. So the Japanese still have control of all the money islands, and they did not do a build in China this turn. And even though they've been pushed back, they would not have to spend very much money to get a stronger foothold again in Asia. Now the KMT took one of the CCP territories, so they liberated it from the Japanese, which they're allowed to do if it's under Japanese or Axis control. So they got 2 IPP for that territory, and it will remain KMT unless the Japanese are able to liberate it from the KMT, and then maybe the Russians take it back. So that is interesting there. So I'm a little surprised at what I'm going to be calling how balanced the game was. Now, there were so many little things that made the game kept flipping back and forth, and sometimes all it can be is an air base or a naval base that you forget to destroy on your turn, or maybe something you just didn't quite see and got outmaneuvered. But these are little mistakes that I think if a player was playing not solo or a group game, they would not have made. So the game is extremely balanced. Probably the biggest mistake the Axis made was early on, and that was sacrificing the Italian fleet in the Mediterranean early on. I think it was this sea zone here, or no, I think it was they put them all in this sea zone right here, and they did not have the ability to scramble their aircraft and protect their navy. And when they lost their navy, that meant Turkey was one step closer to falling. And when Turkey fell, this was probably the biggest boost for the Allies, which is once they had control of here and were able to take control of Greece, that enabled them to annex Turkey, and having access to the Black Sea and bringing transports up to sort of force the Germans to keep spending money over here in Russia instead of in Europe. That was a huge swing. So that's probably not something that's going to happen every game. And I've talked to Bill about this in terms of if there's anything we want to change. There's 2 things. One of them was suggested by Captain G, so I want to thank him for that, and that is the Lend-Lease. So currently, the America used to only be able to Lend-Lease when they were at war. They could Lend-Lease to China, but we've now changed that. So they're able to Lend-Lease to the UK only when the UK is at war, and Russia only when Russia is at war with the European Axis. So that will, maybe get Russia a little bit of money earlier on, especially if their economy isn't going so well. And also, there was a factory in the startup of the game, or starting a major factory in Karelia. And that is a problem because the Russians cannot destroy it when they're not at war. And if the Russians don't roll well in their economy like they did in this game, and the Germans come in and use their Barbarossa sneak attack and take Karelia, that means they have one territory that the Russians cannot counterattack on their subsequent turn. And that would give the Germans a minor IC in Karelia, because when a major is captured, it downgrades, and I think that is too powerful. So that's why the Russians in this game spent so many resources fighting on this northern flank of Finland, and it all had to do with not wanting this factory to fall into German hands. So I have an idea where we're going to play test to fix that, which is instead of on the opening setup having a major in Karelia, what we are going to do is we are going to put a minor in Karelia and a minor in Leningrad. That way, if they are captured by the Germans, they will just be taken off the board. So that is the only two sort of items that we're going to play test going forward. And I think Bill's starting up a play test very soon, or as his new name is CB's Bill. And Captain G has a YouTube game going on himself with Eggman, so stay tuned for that. I'm curious to see how that game goes. And also stay tuned for, I will probably try and get another game going soon, and stay tuned for those details. So thanks for watching, folks. I've had a lot of fun, and look forward to rolling some dice in Global War 1939 very soon.